Please welcome Dr. Zoe Mellick from the Queensland University of Technology. Welcome.
So, I'll talk a little bit about the landscape of ethical labour in Australia and key findings from the study. So, Australia has strong labour laws, but enforcement remains a critical issue in preventing worker exploitation. So, we have the Fair Work Ombudsman, or the FWO, and they're responsible for enforcing these laws that I've listed here on the slide. But in 2019, a compliance report found that only 52% of 371 audits met all legal requirements. So, what were the most common breaches? They were poor record keeping, underpayment, and payslip violations. And so, to address this, from January 2025, intentional wage underpayment has been criminalised. And while this is a step in the right direction, the FWO does not certify compliance, nor do they conduct regular audits, making it very difficult to monitor enforcement without their direct intervention. And so this is where Ethical Clothing Australia, or ECA, comes in. So ECA is the only Australian-based accreditation for local manufacturers in the TCF industry. It's a voluntary program and it requires businesses to undergo an annual audit, which is conducted by the TCF union. So accreditation grants the right for businesses to use the ECA trademark, and this signals to buyers and consumers that a business is ethically certified and compliant with Australian workplace laws. So sign up is voluntary and it has been slow. So in 2024, there were 120 accredited businesses across Australia with only 6 in Queensland. So, given that non-compliance is a widespread issue and there are no other systemic mechanisms exist to ensure businesses meet their legal requirements, particularly because the FWO audits are conducted sporadically, this is a space to pay close attention to. Next slide, please. So, modern slavery is a key concern, and modern slavery exists on a continuum of exploitation, often starting with low wages or unpaid overtime and unsafe conditions. So, within the TCF industry, vulnerable workers are mainly migrant women with limited English skills. They are at higher risk. Despite them having being highly skilled through formal or cultural knowledge. But these workers often find lack of employment alternatives outside the TCF sector. Next slide, please. So the Modern Slavery Act, which we've spoken about today already, requires businesses with turnovers over 100 million federally and 50 million in New South Wales to report on their efforts to address modern slavery issues. However, many manufacturers in Queensland operate below the $100 million threshold and are not subject to mandatory reporting under the Modern Slavery Act, the Federal Commonwealth Act. Now, the revival of New South Wales Ethical Clothing Extended Responsibility Scheme highlights a growing legislative focus on labour risks, and Queensland has an opportunity to take a leadership role here by reinstating the repealed mandatory code of practice for outworkers and also exploring a state-level Modern Slavery Act to strengthen labour protections, which is similar to what New South Wales has already done. Next slide, please. So in the report, we focus a lot on Queensland's procurement policies in this research, and the Buy Queensland initiative, which Andrew Bennett spoke about earlier, but in case you missed that, that's an initiative to support local jobs, businesses, manufacturing, and local growth within the state. This includes 3 guiding documents. So there's the policy, which is the framework, the strategy, which is an event-driven initiatives like the Olympic Games, and the statement, which provides annual updates. Next slide, please. So the Queensland Government's Procurement Statement 2023 prioritises ethical local uniform suppliers, and this also includes accredited suppliers. And this means that local manufacturing growth must align with fair labour practices. Now, we've spoken about the Olympic Games, and it's estimated that the Olympic Games will bring a $1.8 billion economic opportunity to Queensland. and a $180 billion opportunity for procurement. Now, Andrew shared some really interesting stats before about the Paris Games. So they required approximately 70 to 80,000 uniforms, with an additional 100 to 150,000 uniforms were anticipated for workers and delivery partners. So you can kind of get a sense of the immense scale of manufacturing that is required based on those numbers. So while prioritising ethical uniform suppliers within these documents, textiles and garment manufacturing are not explicitly included. And so given the emerging opportunities with the Olympic Games, the government should recognise textiles as a significant supply chain and also look to develop a roadmap for industry growth. And this could be part of the planned market engagement, which Andrew explained earlier, which is occurring in 2025-26, and then later on in 2028 and 2029. Next slide, please. So Queensland's procurement policy mandates ethical compliance through the ethical supplier threshold, the supplier mandate, and the code of conduct. And Andrew spoke about this earlier. So this slide here just gives you a brief summary of all of those different documents. Now, there is an eliminating modern slavery toolkit. However, this toolkit is generic and it does overlook some industry-specific risks, which we go through in the report. Just to give you a quick example, Victoria has prioritised locally and ethically made uniforms, and they've also introduced an ethical supplier register. So it's very easy to find suppliers who are registered as being have ethical credentials. So this highlights how Queensland could be better in some ways to support ethical procurement and support that through accreditation and targeted policies. Next slide, please. So we conducted interviews with ECA accredited and non-accredited manufacturers and surveyed Southeast Queensland TCF stakeholders. Now, the study examined business practices, awareness of labour laws, government support and accreditation challenges, and the findings are categorised into two themes, so barriers and challenges and enablers and opportunities. Next slide, please. So I'll start with the barriers and challenges. So businesses struggled with accreditation, legal knowledge, and workforce limitations. The survey found 44% subcontract work, yet 57% were unsure of their registration status, which raises compliance concerns. Now, the complexity of supply chains where businesses often outsource more than 30% of their work compounds this issue, leaving workers vulnerable to exploitation, making monitoring more difficult. Additionally, half of the respondents rated their knowledge of the TCFAI award obligations as poor to average, which is concerning as the primary method of ensuring compliance was self-assessment. So this points to a serious knowledge gap as businesses may not fully understand their responsibilities, leaving both workers and businesses at risk of non-compliance. Now, in terms of accreditation, a notable barrier was the resistance some businesses expressed towards union involvement in audits and businesses desiring more autonomy in how they could achieve accreditation. Some participants viewed accreditation as unnecessary and questioned its value when it was just seen as sort of nothing more than a certification of compliance with local laws. For some, accreditation was seen as a financial and time-consuming burden, particularly when they perceive themselves as already adhering to local legal requirements. So these barriers are compounded by cost, time, and supply chain resistance. And this is a significant obstacle for businesses that want to seek ethical accreditation. However, we want to note that it may be time intensive and complex in nature, and that's due to a reflection on the legal obligations and ensuring that they are met rather than the accreditation process itself. So this report that we've written does not aim to dissect the intricacies of legal compliance or Australian workplace law, but instead we want to focus on industry perceptions of ethical accreditation. Now, another challenge identified was the skills gap within local manufacturing, which continues to be a major hurdle to growth. So the cost competitiveness of overseas suppliers and the shortage of skilled workers in Australia mean that local manufacturers continue to face significant difficulties in scaling up their operations. Now, this absence of a coordinated strategy for workforce development only exacerbates this issue. And it also highlights the need for more targeted training programs and schemes to attract skilled workers. Next slide, please. So turning now to enablers and opportunities. So participants highlighted the benefits of ethical accreditation, with 88% citing brand value as a key differentiator. There is strong support for government policies that prioritise accredited businesses in procurement, with 69% in favour. Many respondents expressed interest in government funding and training programs to support accreditation, especially for smaller businesses. A key suggestion was to focus on ensuring workers are well trained to foster a culture of ethical practice. And another suggestion was to create a two-tiered supplier system that could help nurture local textile manufacturing sectors and businesses by offering smaller or emerging or overseas suppliers that opportunity to work with larger businesses while ensuring a consistent supply. So this is an idea that Andrew alluded to earlier, that idea of encouraging international businesses to partner with local businesses. Next slide, please. So in summary, while barriers remain, there is strong support for ethical accreditation and a clear opportunity for government involvement. So our report outlines 5 recommendations for the Queensland government. So the first is to develop a tailored roadmap for the TCF sector's growth. The second is to increase awareness of ethical accreditation and modern slavery risks alongside worker training. Third, provide subsidies to reduce accreditation costs for small businesses. And fourth, introduce a local act to address gaps in legislation, particularly for smaller manufacturers. And finally, prioritise local and ethical accreditation in the Buy Queensland policy. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the end of our presentation. Please do get in touch if you have any questions about any of the research projects that we have shared today. And if you would like more information about how to partner with QUT researchers, we look forward to answering any questions that you have. Thank you very much.